No one called the police before that night. No neighbors reported screaming. No doors were broken. No warning signs made the news. From the outside, it was a normal American home. 2 parents. 2 children. A working mother. A father with a long television career. The kind of family people pass every day without a second look. That is what makes this story difficult to sit with. Because when violence finally came, it did not arrive out of nowhere. It came after years of quiet pressure. After money problems that never fully went away. After pride turned into fear. After control slowly replaced partnership. This is not a story about a man who never had a chance. It is a story about a man who had many chances, and a woman who tried to make a marriage work long after it began to feel unsafe. On one ordinary evening, after a children's baseball game, a decision was made that ended one life and erased another. 2 children were left standing in the space between who their parents were and who they would never be again. Tonight, we are not looking for excuses. We are looking at how easily silence can be mistaken for peace. And how quickly a life can fall apart when no one knows what is happening behind the door. Before anyone knew his name from a courtroom, he was known for something else entirely. Reliability. He was born on July 13, 1962, in Paterson, New Jersey. A city built on routine and work. Factories. Schools. Sports fields. The kind of place where respect was earned through presence and consistency, not promises. Growing up there did not teach you how to dream loudly. It taught you how to hold your ground. As a teenager, his size set him apart. Over 6 feet tall, broad, physically imposing. On the basketball court and baseball field, that body meant authority. Coaches relied on him. Teammates followed him. He learned early that strength created order. That people listened when you stood firm. Acting was never part of the plan. It entered his life quietly. Almost casually. While in college, he watched his girlfriend attend acting classes. It looked manageable. Structured. Something that rewarded discipline more than chaos. When he tried it himself, he found that it fit him in ways sports no longer did. Acting offered control of a different kind. Marks to hit. Lines to learn. Emotions to release on command. He was good at it. There are no public stories of a troubled childhood. No interviews describing early rage or instability. When people search his early life, they find very little beyond dates and credits. That absence helped shape the image others would later believe. A man without drama. Without visible cracks. By the early 1990s, he had transitioned into professional acting. Small roles at first. Guest appearances. Parts that demanded presence more than personality. In 1992, he appeared on Law and Order. In 1994, he joined Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. These were not breakthroughs. But they were foundations. Hollywood responded to him in a specific way. He was cast as men who belonged in rooms of authority. Officers. Guards. Enforcers. Characters whose power came from silence rather than speech. That pattern followed him from project to project. He shared screens with major stars without competing with them. Harrison Ford. Tom Hanks. Angela Bassett. The work kept coming. Slowly. Reliably. Enough to build a life around. For years, that life held together. A career that did not explode, but did not collapse. Marriage. Children. A sense that everything was under control. That sense would become central to who he believed he was. Long before violence entered the conversation, Michael Jace had built an identity around steadiness. Around being the man who shows up. The man who does not lose his grip. What no one could see yet was how fragile that grip would become once the structures supporting it began to fail. At his peak, nothing about his life looked dangerous. He was not the kind of actor chased by tabloids or followed by paparazzi. He was something quieter and, in many ways, more secure. A working professional in an industry known for instability. Year after year, his name appeared in credits. Television episodes. Feature films. Projects that paid the bills and reinforced the belief that this path would continue. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, he moved easily between film and television. He worked alongside some of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment: Harrison Ford, Tom Hanks, Angela Bassett, Keanu Reeves, Robert De Niro. These were not passing moments. They were repeated confirmations that he belonged in these spaces. But the role that truly anchored his public image arrived in 2002. When he was cast as Detective Julian Lowe on the FX series The Shield, his career found its center. The show was intense, morally complex, and unapologetically raw. It demanded performances that felt lived in, not theatrical. Over 7 seasons and nearly 90 episodes, he became part of a cast that defined one of the most influential police dramas of its time. Julian Lowe was a man divided against himself. Deeply religious. Quietly conflicted. Struggling with his sexuality inside a culture built on power and aggression. It was not a loud performance. It relied on restraint. On eyes that held back more than they revealed. Audiences responded to that honesty. Week after week, viewers saw him as a figure of internal discipline. Someone trying to hold his life together while surrounded by chaos. For many, that character blurred into the actor himself. The idea formed quietly. This is a man who understands control. Outside the show, his life followed a familiar American pattern. Marriage. Children. A home in Southern California. Work that arrived regularly enough to feel dependable. From the outside, there was no reason to worry. But Hollywood success does not always come with security. While The Shield brought visibility, it did not bring the kind of wealth that insulates families from downturns. He was not a lead star commanding massive salaries. When the show ended, the industry moved on. Opportunities became less predictable. The work that followed did not carry the same weight or consistency. Still, the image remained intact. Friends. Neighbors. Even industry peers saw a man who had made it through decades of acting without collapse. Someone who had done everything right. Someone who stayed employed while others disappeared. That perception mattered deeply to him. Because when success becomes part of identity, losing it feels like losing oneself. And when control feels essential to survival, any threat to it can feel unbearable. Long before the crisis arrived, Michael Jace was standing on ground that looked solid, but was already beginning to shift. The illusion of stability is often strongest just before it breaks. The collapse did not begin with violence. It began with numbers that no longer worked. As the steady rhythm of acting slowed, reality pressed closer. Roles came less often. The kind of work that once felt dependable became uncertain. Behind the scenes, bills arrived on time even when checks did not. Credit filled the gaps. Then debt filled the credit. In March of 2011, the truth became public. Bankruptcy. Court filings revealed a life stretched far beyond its limits. A home facing foreclosure. Hundreds of thousands of dollars owed. Missed payments. Unpaid taxes. By some accounts, the total debt climbed toward a figure that would have crushed most families. For a man whose identity was built on steadiness and control, this was not just financial failure. It was exposure. Pressure followed him everywhere. At home, tension grew heavier. Money arguments do not stay about money. They turn into questions of worth. Of responsibility. Of blame. His marriage, once quiet and private, became strained by fear and frustration that had nowhere to go. April tried to hold things together. Friends later described her as disciplined, athletic, and focused. She worked as a financial aid advisor at Biola University. She ran regularly. Structure mattered to her. Stability mattered to her. For years, she pushed forward, hoping effort alone could fix what felt broken. By 2014, that hope was gone. On May 19, she told her husband she wanted a divorce. After 9 years of marriage, she chose to leave rather than continue living inside uncertainty. The conversation escalated quickly. Accusations followed. He believed she was cheating. She left the house to create distance. What followed was not silence. It was control slipping away. Messages came one after another. Questions. Demands. Attempts to pull her back into a space she no longer trusted. When she responded, she made her fear clear. She did not feel safe returning home. His anger frightened her. She worried about what he might do in front of their children. He told her he had left the house. He stayed. While she was gone, he drank. He waited. He took a revolver and kept it close. The decision was not announced. It was not dramatic. It sat quietly, growing heavier with each passing minute. When April returned later that evening, she was not alone. She had just picked up their 2 sons from a baseball game. The children entered the house expecting routine. Familiar walls. Familiar voices. He told them to go to their room. What happened next unfolded behind a door they would never forget. An argument resumed. Anger turned physical. He shot her in the back as she tried to move away. As she lay wounded, he mocked her love of running, telling her to run to heaven. Then he fired again. By the time it was over, April was dying on the floor of her home. Afterward, Michael Jace called the police himself. He called her father. He called her brother. He waited outside as officers arrived. Calm. Still. The men who once believed control defined him had reached the point where nothing could be controlled again. 2 children remained inside the house. The collapse was complete. When the case reached the courtroom, the country did not argue about what happened. There were no unknown suspects. No missing pieces. The men responsible had already confessed. What remained was interpretation. Prosecutors framed the shooting as a deliberate act. They pointed to the hours spent waiting inside the house. To the text messages sent earlier that day. To the choice of a revolver. A weapon that requires intention with every pull of the trigger. 3 shots, they argued, could not be dismissed as panic. The defense asked the jury to see a different man. One overwhelmed by financial collapse. By fear of abandonment. By a marriage ending when he believed he had nothing left. They described the killing as a moment of emotional explosion, not a calculated plan. But the testimony changed the tone of the room. The couple's son, only 10 years old, told the jury what he heard that night. The words spoken before the final shots. The memory was clear. The silence afterward was louder. His testimony stripped away abstraction and replaced it with reality. As the trial continued, another truth surfaced. Allegations from a previous marriage. Witnesses describing violence that had never reached headlines. Choking. Physical abuse. A pattern that suggested this was not a sudden break, but an escalation long ignored. The jury deliberated briefly. Second-degree murder. A sentence of 40 years to life followed. In legal terms, the case closed. In human terms, it remained unfinished. Across the United States, the reaction was restrained but heavy. Media coverage focused on the contradiction. A man who spent years portraying law enforcement officers on screen had committed one of the most intimate crimes imaginable. There were no debates about fame or privilege. The story resisted spectacle. Instead, it raised uncomfortable questions. How many families appear stable until the moment they are not? How often financial pressure intersects with identity and control? How silence inside a home can be mistaken for peace by everyone outside it? Beyond America, the case echoed a familiar truth. Domestic violence does not follow cultural boundaries. It does not announce itself with warning labels. It often reveals itself only after irreversible damage has been done. For many viewers, the story of Michael Jace became less about celebrity and more about proximity. About how close this kind of tragedy can be to ordinary life. The law delivered a verdict. Society was left with a mirror. April Jace did not become a headline by choice. She became one because she chose to leave. She was 40 years old. A mother. A professional. A runner who valued discipline and forward motion. Friends described her as focused, warm, and dependable. At Biola University, where she worked as a financial aid advisor, students trusted her. Colleagues relied on her. After her death, the university created a scholarship in her name. Not as a statement, but as remembrance. A way to attach her name to opportunity instead of violence. For her children, life divided into before and after. Before was routine. School. Sports. Home. After was absence. A mother gone. A father sentenced to spend most of his life in prison. No explanation could soften that reality. No verdict could restore what was lost. For the men responsible, the future narrowed to concrete walls and scheduled hours. Once known for decades of steady work in American film and television, Michael Jace now exists primarily as a cautionary reference. His performances are rarely revisited without context. His name no longer stands on its own. This is not a story that offers comfort. There is no lesson that fits neatly at the end. No moment where everything makes sense. Financial stress does not explain cruelty. Fear does not justify control. And remorse, no matter how genuine, does not undo harm. What remains is awareness. Domestic violence does not always look dramatic. It can live inside quiet homes. Inside financial pressure. Inside relationships that appear functional to everyone outside them. It often escalates not because no one cared, but because no one saw. If this story left you uneasy, that discomfort has value. It means something inside you recognized the danger of silence. If it reminded you of a situation you have witnessed, or one you have lived through, do not dismiss that recognition. Walking away is not failure. Speaking up is not betrayal. And control is never the same as love. Some lives end too soon. Some stories end without closure. But remembering them clearly is one way we refuse to let silence finish the job.